Er zijn 3 dingen in het leven van een kunstenaar. Ten eerste, te kunnen werken. Ten tweede, goed te kunnen werken. En ten derde, de grootst mogelijke weerklank bij zijn publiek te vinden.
Who's afraid of art? Tyrants and wannabe tyrants, so it seems.
Artist Alexandra Skochelenko has been sentenced to 7 years in prison by St. Petersburg's invasion, spreading false information, detention.
With autocracy growing, with tyrants on the roll, Balie brings together over 40 international artists, writers and thinkers during Forum on European Culture. We celebrate the subversive power of art and literature and curate works of opposition that preserve the histories autocrats want to erase and imagine the futures they fear.
So my question is, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Art against the tyrants. Not for the faint-hearted.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome here at the Balie, for everyone here in the room, but also those who are listening online. My name is Larissa Biemond. I'm a program editor here at the Balie, and I'll be moderating this program here, as you can see. Together with migrants, the working class community, queer community, women are often among the first to suffer whenever a society takes an autocratic or an anti-democratic turn. And nowadays we can see this worrying trend happening before our very eyes. Anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, transphobic, sexist, and go on, thoughts are being shared more openly, both in the public, in the media, but also in the political arena. So the questions that I wanted to discuss in this program are what solutions feminism, rooted in solidarity and intersectionality, can provide for all of us, but also, and maybe most importantly, referring to the title, how can feminists fight back against this autocratic turn and this attacks on women's rights and the rights of other minorities? That's what I want to discuss with all of you here in the audience, but first and foremost with my speakers, who are Lauren Bastide, Margriet van Hees, Narina Chak. But first, to start off the conversation, I would like to welcome Lauren to the stage to talk. Give her a welcome applause.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Thanks for being here. I'm going to introduce you a bit more for the audience, for those who might not know. Lauren, you're a journalist with a degree in political science and gender studies, and in 2016 you created the podcast La Poutre, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, where you interviewed female artists, activists and politicians. And last year you launched the podcast Folie Douce, a series of conversations about mental health with artists, activists and authors. And you've published several books, among them Présentes, and most recently Futurist, How Feminism is Going to Save the World. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe what I referred to a bit in the beginning in my introduction, every day in the news we hear all these alarming, we see these headlines about rollback on women's rights, queer rights, other minorities' rights. Maybe all in all not enough to be very optimistic about. I'm not feeling very optimistic right now. But when I read your book, you were quite optimistic. Can you maybe explain that? Can you give me some hope on what's going on here?
Well, actually, I'm happy this book gave you hope, because I wrote it for that, because I can feel very depressed sometimes also with the news, and it's really scary what's going on in the world today. But first of all, there is one thing I'd like to question in this idea. We hear a lot that what we're testifying right now would be a backlash. Like we've had those, I don't know, like 8 years, like the Me Too movement and the Black Lives Matter movement and all these movements for women's rights, for queer people's rights, for people of color's rights. And now it feels like the fascism is going to like push this back because we went too far, and you know, the far right people are really upset and now they're fighting back. But I don't think it's this way. I think the growing force for the last century, the force of capitalism, of colonialism, is this one. I think this hatred, this division, this rejection of the otherness of women, of queer people, of black people, is actually the main movement of history. And we feminists, we activists, we are the backlash against this force. And seeing things this way is the first way to be optimistic, because actually they're very loud right now because they're very upset, because we've won quite many battles, and they can say whatever they want and they can win elections. And I put commas between win because I know the situation is very similar here than in France. Like, they're making very high numbers in the polls, but they never get the majority, and they have to govern in this weird way by making alliances with right, or I don't know, it's not clear. They're not like the triumphant party that they pretend to be. Even Trump, there is a lot of resistance in the US in spite of everything he wants us to believe.
Maybe the most recent example, what we saw yesterday in Budapest with the Pride March going on.
Exactly, yeah, the Pride March. And so I have the feeling that all the books we wrote, the exhibition we created, the conferences we organized, the podcasts we produced, the ideas we shared in the world for the last 10 years are there. And there is no way it's going to go back. And there is no way it's going to go backwards. And they're very angry, but we're quite angry too.
So how would you describe this? If it's not a conservative backlash, I think in your book you said it's more conflict escalation going from their side, going on from the conservative side.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's. I think the real issue actually is money. The problem with these people is that they're rich, and the problem is that billionaires mainly are on their side. So I think it's more a very economical question. I think they make us believe it's about, some philosophical idea of what humanity should be, but it's mainly about money.
And in your book, you talk about intersectional feminism, how it's going to save the world. Maybe for some people in the audience, could you explain how do you view that? What is intersectional feminism, and how can we use it to fight back or to unite against all these powers that are going on?
Intersectional feminism is this idea that if you think about sexism in the society, and if you try to understand how gender is gonna interact with our everyday lives and impact women, men, and other people in their everyday life, this way of thinking, to be precise, to be correct, has to be intertwined between reflection on race, on class, on disability. Of course, you can divide the word between men and women, but there is much more to that. And actually, this idea came from a lawyer, an American lawyer called Kimberly Crenshaw in the 90s, where she was asked about discrimination Black women suffered in a company. And actually, she was asked, are they being discriminated against because they're women or because they're Black? And her answer was both. Both. Their situation is very specific because they're Black women. They suffer racism in a way only women suffer racism, and they suffer sexism in a way only Black women suffer sexism. So from this idea of intersecting the discrimination and thinking them together, we feminists in the year that came after also intersected queer phobia and disability studies with all this gender studies, and it's a very important thing because sexism alone is not a proper way to describe the world.
And you wrote this recent book. You wrote several years ago. Is there any part you changed your mind on, or you would like to add to the book if you would publish it now?
Yeah, I published in 2022. I don't think I would change a word. Actually, I very much agree with everything I wrote in this book. I had also, it was a kind of a final a conclusion to, I don't know, more or less 8 years of studying feminism and, being into gender studies in a very active way. So I really tried to put everything I understood and everything I knew in this book. And there is one idea that is in the book about care ethics, which is like a philosophical movement, very feminist one, but it's also very linked to psychology, and it's just a way of like thinking of what is good or bad in a very different way as the very binary way we're used to. Like there would be a good behavior and a bad behavior, but in care ethics you understand that things are very more complex. Like every human is dependent from the other, and every decision we take is depending on many other decisions other humans take. And also care ethics is the way of seeing that caring in this society is mainly on the shoulder of women and people of color. And it's also very despised, like caring, taking care of people, feeling emotions, taking care of elderly, of sick, of kids, is really a job that we give to people we consider like less important in the society.
And we don't give them very high salaries as well.
And they are very badly paid. And that's, when you understand this, you understand everything. You really understand why the world is so fucked up, and why like nature is being destroyed, why poor people are getting poorer, sick people are getting sicker. And care ethics is an idea that I start developing in this book, and that is really growing on me over the years. And it's very central to what I'm doing now about mental health. Because, of course, there is a very different way to think about mental issues when you use this a scale of care to read it. So yeah, I think it really still is my point of view. Although I have to admit that after this book was published, like 1 year after, I published a little fiction, little novel called 2060. In French, it's not translated, and actually it's a dystopia. It's about the end of the world, and it's a very, very sad story where like fascism has won and the earth is being destroyed, and we spend a day with an 80-year-old woman, a woman who is 80-year-old in 2060. Oh, that's funny, that's the age I will be. And things went really bad. And I think that after writing this very optimistic book, I had to put my pessimism somewhere. So I put it in this little dystopia.
I guess also in a way to imagine what could happen if we maybe don't do anything, or if we don't fight back.
Yeah.
I maybe also wanted to talk a bit about the French perspective. You are French. I've noticed lots of French people in the audience. I know last year France was shaken up by the case of Gisèle Pelicot and her bravery and outspokenness in the trial. And I was wondering, in the book you talked about being disappointed about the Me Too movement, calling it's more of a support group and not necessarily bringing about change. And I was wondering whether the Gisèle Pelicot case has been more of a tipping point in talking about sexual violence in France. What's your perspective on that?
Well, it has been, of course, a very important, a historical moment for the discussion about rape and for the Me Too movement. And I really share your vision of her as a very brave and incredible person. I mean, wow, she has been incredible. But I'm not sure it's very different from what I write in the book, because I think that in spite of the fact that we have more than 60 men that are accused of raping, sleeping and drugged women in this trial, the systemic aspect of rape still hasn't been understood by most people, and I will say most men in France. Every time that there is something that is very strong in the media, it is presented as something exceptional. It's an incredible story. Those men are monsters, and this woman is so unlucky. And no one is really reaching the conclusion we should reach, is that rape is everywhere and all the time. So I think it's a step forward, but I don't think we're there yet.
And maybe also what characterizes the debate in France when it's going about, when we're talking about feminism, what are the most hotly debated topics over there? Could be a bit different than here in the Netherlands. So I'm curious.
I don't know how it is in Netherlands, but unfortunately, feminists in France seem to be a bit divided. For example, like my intersectional vision of things is not shared by everyone in France. Very often, feminists in France would argue over some laws that are voted against Muslim women who wear a scarf on their head. I think these laws are racist, and it's really doesn't make any sense to want to prevent women who wear a veil to practice their sports or, go with their children to the theater because they wear a scarf.
It's about forcing women what to wear or not to wear.
Yeah, exactly. It's really stupid. But also, well, I don't want to say stupid, but I think it doesn't make any sense. That's for sure. But some feminists in France still think that, we should fight against any type of religion, which is not the feminist. I don't fight religion. I fight extremism. I fight, people who don't want women to be free. But I also think that a woman can be free to choose the way she wants to practice her faith, and where it's none of our business. And also there is this question in France about, this old tradition of la drague lourde, quoi, like Gérard Depardieu. Like some people keep on thinking that it's just a sweet guy and not an aggressor. Yeah, he's still being defended by some women, and that's really hard to understand. But I think in France there is this tradition of some people think it's really normal to touch a woman's ass, and it's just being fun and free. So there is still a lot of work to be done.
So I hear, yeah. Maybe it's time to introduce my two other speakers.
Sorry, you're shocked.
I can never be shocked anymore. I wanted to introduce my two other speakers, Margriet van Hees and Aline Schack. Please come forward while I introduce you. Please give them applause. First, Margriet, you're a cultural scholar at the University of Amsterdam, specializing in gender theory, queer studies, and the queer movement. And you also co-translated Judith Butler's most recent book, Who's Afraid of Gender? Welcome. And Alina, you work as a consultant at ABN AMRO on the organizational change issues, and you also sit on the board of AVA, an organization that represents the interests of everyone who uses contraception and abortion care and gives them a voice in politics, science, and policymakers. Thank you for being here. Maybe, Margriet, Alina, do you want to maybe comment on anything that we discussed here just now? Margriet, you can start.
Is it working?
Is it on?
Yeah. Let's engage also with the audience, because when we were waiting here, we heard a lot of people speaking French, so we're kind of assuming that the minority here is from France, which is amazing.
The microphone to your...
Oh yeah, it's of course the Feminist Against Tyrants, and it's a European festival, and I think it's amazing to when we think about intersectionality, also think about solidarity, and also think about solidarity between European cultures, such as the Dutch and the French cultures that are slightly different, but we are in the end all in the same boat. And that I would love to also talk about, how we therefore can subvert the subversive power of feminism in Europe, and the anti-gender movement that I think we should address here as well. Like 3 years after your book, it just became worse. And so that.
What do you want to talk about? What do you want to elaborate on that?
Oh, in the conversation. So this is a conversation on stage, but it is also with you. So it's always a weird thing, and then there's a camera for internet. So let's go there. So what would I like to add? I would like to add that was a really interesting conversation, very inspiring. I made a lot of notes. There's so many things I want to talk about, but then let's start about intersectional thinking, which is a thinking about solidarity, about knowing that everybody is affected by sexism and racism and classism in different ways, but also by ableism, of course, and how to speak back. And Kimberly Crenshaw was the first one to speak back in a language that people understood. The term intersectionality stuck with us. It was an easy term to understand the different ways we are affected by racism and sexism. But it has been thought out further since the 1980s in so many interesting and queer ways. And I would love to add that maybe a bit, that when thinking intersection, when thinking sexism is intertwined with racism, also means that you kind of know what sex is, that you know what racial categories are. But we are racialized differently, we are sexed differently, we're gendered differently, sexualized differently wherever we go. Already differently in France than in the Netherlands, because here, yes, squeezing each other's butt is definitely less seen as a fun way or humorous. Yeah, you can face violence here if you do that, or evoke. So thinking through intersectional thinking should also be thinking through difference in itself. So racial categories are never static. So we should start, if you want feminists to subvert power or to speak truth in the face of power, such as the French philosopher Michel Foucault said, Pérésia, it is also about thinking through the constant changes that we are in and the diasporic spaces that we are in. For example, being racialized in the Netherlands is so different from being racialized in France or in Indonesia or in the United States. And this makes the world so complex that it's really hard to find your voice as a feminist and not being disregarded as a feminist. And then my last thing then I wanted to add was that feminism should be talked about in plural, always. There are so many different forms of feminism that it's sometimes difficult to find each other, as you said, Lauren. So there is a feminism that is protecting the women, following J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter book.
That's not feminism.
Yeah.
And I know you know from your T-shirt.
Yeah. So, but then,
They claim to be feminists.
But she calls herself a feminist, and Kim Kardashian calls herself a feminist. And who are we to decide who's a feminist or not? So there's also there's so many ways we have to think democratically through solidarity that is really, really difficult, but we have to keep on doing that. So yes, protect the dolls, don't touch our boys and girls from the trans world.
Maybe to start in, what is the reason you often see with those autocratic regimes or the anti-democratic or far-right extreme regimes that they are very focused on the transgender community or anything that doesn't fit the man-women label? Can you maybe give a response? What is their, I would say, obsession with this whole thing? Yeah, as a gender scientist.
Yeah, I can answer that now that I've translated Judith Butler's latest book, Who's Afraid of Gender, and I'm going to follow Butler's thoughts here. So Judith Butler is an American philosopher who's also a lot residing in Paris. So I'm assuming that it's not a stranger to you. They are known for their first book, Gender Trouble and Bodies That Matter, and actually also for the establishment of queer studies. And according to Judith Butler, the anti-gender movement started already in 2014 when the Catholic Church saw that there was a problem with their popularity now that there were so many court cases against them due to sexual abuse of children, and that not only that it was hidden, so that the church knew about it, the people in charge knew about it, but they didn't do anything. They had a problem, a PR problem. And therefore they started to promote, again, the nuclear family with a father and a mother and children to go back to some kind of values. And doing this, the term gender became a problem. And you've seen this in France. Gender was scrapped from school books, the term. As if gender itself as a term was a danger to this nuclear family that the Catholic Church wanted to use. And to give you a small example is when the Pope was in Belgium last year to apologize, the late Pope, to apologize for the cover-up of child abuse. It backlashed. The Belgian people didn't want to accept apologies. They said this is too little too late. And in the plane back, and then we're going to go to you, in the plane back, the Pope said to the journalists, don't look at me. Look at all those doctors who are doing abortions. They are the real killers. They are serial or hitmen, he called them. And so it's like, don't look at me. I'm not a problem. I'm not stealing your money. I'm not putting your money in the pocket. It's the trans people. It's the migrants. So it's like, look back, look there. And this
look away.
The scapegoating. Yeah, that Judith Butler describes in this latest book, Who's Afraid of Gender. And that is also so indeed. Everything that is already marginalized is pointed out as the problem so that we don't fixate on how they are stealing our money anymore. Yeah.
You see that as well, Alina?
Yeah, I do think that so I work in abortion rights and abortion healthcare, and what we see that is also similar, I think, to on some level what is happening to the trans community is that it's about control. So control about your own body, because it's very powerful to be able to decide who you are as a person, how many children you want or don't want. And I think for state and at some level also for men, it's quite scary that people can have their reproductive power within themselves, because you need populations to have workers, to do the work, to do the care, what you described. You need people for the military, and that's a very strange way of thinking. And I think for some people it's always like, it's also like, okay, that's really like far-fetched, but actually it's not, because it's really about control and power. And these issues have been used and exacerbated to make these culture wars, because actually abortion was not really an issue in the United States. They made it an issue, and then people started to. I think it was the evangelicals who started it, and then more and more people from the several Christian groups started to join them, and then the movement grew. But it was a very deliberate movement, because no one really thought that it was an issue, and that's, I think, something really important that we have to keep in mind when we look at these issues. And having a binary world also is easy. It's easier to control because it's really clear, like who are the men, who are the women. So that's also something you have to keep in mind. And I just wanted to add something to your beautiful story about the Gisèle Pelicot movement, or like the maybe non-movement it created. And it made me think that also in the Netherlands, I just looked it up what the situation is in France, but I think we tend to look at inequality as something very huge. And how do I say this? In my work, I work at tackling discrimination, and I tend to notice that people think about discrimination in very grand gestures of discrimination. Like beating someone, we think about George Floyd, like this type of discrimination. But inequality, discrimination is everyday life, and it's very subtle. So what happens with us psychologically, it's very hard for us to comprehend that it's happening every day. And then it's not easy to recognize. And it's also very easy to then be taken away from us, because we don't even know what true equality looks like. So how can we defend it? It's like this: the microaggressions, the subtle comments, the rape that is also in students, their sex life. It's so normalized. In the Netherlands, we are now on place 43 at the Global Gender Gap Index. And in the Netherlands, we really see ourselves as a very progressive country, very liberal. I bet you also view the Netherlands as this. But honestly, I think we cannot use the argument of we are very liberal anymore, and our the power we had for liberalizing gay marriage from the last century. I think we're out of it. We cannot use it anymore because we are not so liberal or progressive as we think.
It's been 25 years. What else have we done? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So we have this one thing and we just play it over and over again, and maybe we can talk about this later, how change works. But this is really important because if you brand it really well, it's very hard for people to believe something different. And I just saw that France is on place 22, but I'm so interested to hear about what you think about, maybe we can discuss this later, about the situation in France. And when we touch upon like the change, how do we make change happen? Because I was thinking about the movement in France for putting abortion in the constitution.
The constitution, yeah.
So I'm very curious, like I'm still analyzing whether it was a successful movement and what I should use from that movement in the Netherlands. So
yeah, let's maybe touch up on that, because in the Netherlands since the 70s, there you can have an abortion, but it's still in the criminal code. Under certain circumstances, you're not going to be prosecuted. In France, it's in the constitution. Maybe you can explain, Lauren, how did France come from an illegal abortion to enshrining it in the constitution there? Do you have tips?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that actually it's crazy that there are laws about abortion. It's crazy that we need to enshrine it in the constitution to keep the right to have control over our bodies. Like one of the countries where the right of abortion is the best for women is Canada, because in Canada there is no law, and feminist Canadians don't want a law. There is no law for pulling out a tooth out of your mouth. There is no law that decides like how long after the minute your tooth is sick you should have, how long the doctor should think because before pulling your tooth out.
Yeah, like under what circumstances you can receive the healthcare.
It's incredible. And so actually, this is a limit you should put. And every time, I think Macron was very happy to do something that would make him look less conservative than he is. And it was a cheap gesture. And actually also the text, we're not really happy about it because there was a text that was very open and that considered that some people could become pregnant that were not women. And in the final text, it says women. So it's like, also excluding trans people from the right of abortion, which could be dangerous if tomorrow...
Could be leaving a loophole.
Yeah, exactly. But still, yeah, it was a good signal. And it's always nice to have some feminist victory. And I have feminist friends, activists who fought for this for years. So when it reached this point, it was kind of cool, yeah. But it's a lot of work. And also there is a group of European feminists right now who are trying to. I don't know if you heard about this. I'm sure you have the name of the campaign. My Voice, My Choice. Thank you so much. To try and enshrine abortion in the European right. And that would be, I think, really cool. Because, I feel so much for Polish women right now and other countries in Europe where abortion is complicated. I think Italian are starting to it's becoming really hard to get an abortion because even if the law protects them, some doctors don't want to do it anymore. So it's like technically very hard to obtain it. So I think Europe is a strong, is a strong tool when we fight for this right.
And Alina, can you maybe explain how it works in the Netherlands and what AVA does as an organization with this?
Yes, so in the Netherlands, you can abortion is in the criminal code. That means that it's an exception, as you all also explained. You can only have an abortion in an abortion clinic, and since very recently, a GP can also prescribe abortion pills. Not many GPs do this, so we need to do some work on this. And in the Netherlands, we had a mandatory waiting period of 5 days. That is no longer the case. Now it's a flexible mandatory period, and you determine that with your doctor. So that's what the law officially says.
And the waiting period is like you have 5 days to think
To
about whether you really want to do it.
Yes.
You're really sure you want
Are
to
you
do this?
sure?
Really sure you want to do it.
I don't think we think enough about how sexist these laws are. But AVA is a client organization. So we see people that make use of abortion care or contraceptive care as clients, like patients, but I don't know if we are patients if we use the contraceptive pill, but we want to let the world know that we are like a stakeholder in this process as people that make use of this care, and we want we want a seat at the table and a foot at the door. So we want to make sure that what women want and need is central in the care, in the laws, in the science, in the politics, everywhere. And that is our goal. What we do is we research what women really want, or what other people that can get pregnant really want, and what their experiences are. Because in the Netherlands, we have our abortion law for like 40 years, and 30 women were interviewed like for the evaluation, and that's insane because we have 30,000 plus abortions per year, so many abortion experiences, and we need to know how people are really experiencing this care. And since last year, we are advocating for pain relief during IUD procedures, because IUDs hurt as hell when you put them in. And in the Netherlands, you only get some paracetamol or ibuprofen. I don't know how it is in France.
I love how we all laugh about it.
And that is also like a small example of how internalized this sexism is, and we really think it's normal. We think we shouldn't, like in the Netherlands we call it zeuren. In the Netherlands we always say just be normal, but like what is normal?
Don't whine, don't complain.
Don't whine, don't complain. And we really think that we should also like behave this way, and we are trying to make things happen, change happen. So that is some of the work that we do. We also know the people from the My Voice, My Choice campaign, a very good campaign. And what they want is not to put it in EU law, because what they want is to make sure that states that give women abortion care get a financial compensation. Because in the Netherlands you can have it's a bit weird, because in the Netherlands we have this crazy criminal law, but also we have like a very long period until you can do your abortion, like 24 weeks. So in Europe, the Netherlands is very important for other women. I get emails like every week from women from Italy saying that they need to come to the Netherlands and if we can help them with their abortion. So basically that's what My Voice, My Choice is. And I think it's really cool that it started small, but they are making very big waves. And it's really inspiring to see how big the movement now is across all Europe. So it's a very good cooperation, I think.
And maybe for both you and Margriet, we have upcoming elections in the Netherlands again. There's going to be a lot of campaigning. You both work in fields that often get a lot of hate from the far right. How have you seen it changed over the years? Are you expecting a lot of backlash in upcoming months? Can you maybe elaborate on that?
I had the most backlash when I stood up for transgender people in the newspapers. The hate mail and being doxxed and trending on Twitter. Well, I'm not on Twitter, of course, as a political act, so it didn't bother me. And also, I work for a great institute, which is the University of Amsterdam. So I'm in a very safe place, being in an institute. So I feel safe to talk my truth. But it doesn't go always for my transgender and intersex and queer students who are not in that safe place. So I feel as a feminist the responsibility to speak up for those who didn't find their voice yet. You know, I'm old enough to do that and old enough to take a blow here and there. But in the upcoming elections, to me, what is so interesting is how this fascist anti-gender movement, how successful they are in creating fear, in making people believe that there is a problem that lies with minorities, and that it is the minorities who take away their elderly care, and not the neoliberal techno-fascists. And that is so fascinating. And therefore, yeah, the upcoming elections, let's hope they are democratic. And let's hope they're not being hijacked by Elon Musk, such as he was trying to do in Eastern Europe and in the United States.
And in Germany.
Yeah. So, and therefore, I think as feminists against tyrants, I'm sticking a bit to the topic because I need that, because otherwise my thoughts go everywhere, because I have to restrict myself to say what I want to say. So as feminists, we have a duty to speak up and to kill joy, following Sarah Ahmed. Yeah. So if you ever need help, Sarah Ahmed wrote this handbook of feminists kill joy. So how to speak up, how to kill the joy of those guys who think it's fun to squeeze your butt, how to kill their joy. Yeah. So it's tough because you're the killjoy. And also, if you point out that problem, following Sarah Ahmed, you become part of the problem. And then it's about, like, if you go away, the problem will go away. And I think a lot of women here in the workplace will recognize this. You pointed out sexism in the workplace, and the next thing you knew, you were gone. So that is super interesting. So then, as feminists, we have a place at the table. We're listened to. But are we acted upon? Are we taken serious? So there's still so many levels of misogyny, of sexism, of also women who side with the patriarchy because they never had a problem with men. They love working with men. They have men at home. They love beer. They love football. Yes, they take a stripper now and then because that's great. You know, I'm a good sport. You know what they refer to as the pick-me girls. I love the next generation who have these really fun terms for everything. Like the pick-me girl is a girl that is like siding with patriarchy, so the patriarchy will pick them to be that one woman in the board. But we still have a very structural problem, and as feminists, we should still keep pointing out the structural problems with gender inequality, wage gap, and especially, again, the rape laws and abortion laws in every European country are ridiculous. And now in the Netherlands, they recently rewrote the rape law. So it's much better for the victims. Now they rewrote it based on the experiences of victims of rape. And how they marketed it from the government was, our culture changed and our culture doesn't support the old rape law anymore. So that's why we needed a new rape law, because our culture changed. And I'm like, whose culture changed? Women never liked being raped. We didn't change at all. And so that is so fascinating how many layers of going wrong there are, and it's us who have to constantly point it out and speak up, and therefore kill the joy. And sorry, but there are so many other forms of joy, because that's another very powerful message, that we can offer other sorts of joy that is not patriarchal, joy that is facing all kinds of discrimination and misogyny, but we can still dance to the music we like, and maybe that's a very utopian. You said there's no way how to choose between a dystopia, the utopia, and what will work better. I thought that was the most inspiring thing you said today, and all the other days you say many more things.
Thank you.
Yeah, so are we choosing dystopia or utopia? And maybe we can follow Donna Haraway then and make a combination of those words. And they talk about these utopias and make up new worlds for us that we want to live in. So instead of also talking about gender dysphoria, we talk about gender euphoria. Because and that's not an illness. We don't have to be medicalized for that. That would be my 2 cents of thoughts in this. Thank you, Larissa, for the very difficult question that I answered in 5 different ways.
Incredible
but now we're back here. Okay, back to you.
Maybe also Alina, if you want to say anything about that elections.
I think with the upcoming elections, it's very important to, speak out, of course, but that's always easier said than done, right? So what should I do? I should speak out, but how does that work? Where do you speak out? Do you do it on Instagram? so that's what we try to do, and what we see is that it really helps to connect with other people, organizations. Just surround yourself with people who also feel that something needs to change, and then you see that it becomes much easier to kill the joy together instead of just on your own. And it's when I say this, I also realize that it's a very basic answer, but it's true. There have been many organizations, so I'm in change. There are so many theories about how to make societal change happen, and it's when people come together, and when thoughts are not just with one person, but they like spread out to other groups of people. That is how change works. That is also why in fascist regimes people are not allowed to organize, because when people organize, amazing things can happen. So that's very important for us, and I think the upcoming months we will try to influence where we can on the programs and the elections. What scares me is our dependence on social media for organizing, campaigning, spreading the word, because social media is much more on like the right-wing side. It's not impossible, because the maybe to be mayor of New York, he managed to do a very successful social media campaign. So there is something in the algorithm that rewards you when you are inspiring in a way and you know how to connect with the audience. So we have to hang on to this, but we also have to think about, okay, what are other ways than social media to connect? And that is really to physically organize as well. I really believe that. And maybe I'm speaking for the Netherlands. I think in the Netherlands we forgot how this works, to physically organize, because I don't know how it is in France, but in the Netherlands it's a big deal if you go to a protest or to some group. Like, it's scary. And I remember, like, the first time I went to a protest, I went with two friends, and we were also very scared, but then I got like the megaphone, and then I said something on stage, and my friends, they got snapped by a journalist and they were on the news. So then it was like, okay, we are not scared anymore. But I really understand that it's a very scary thing. But we have to remind ourselves that these tyrants, they want us to make us feel hopeless. Like we are not in the power to change anything, because everything is wrecked and we cannot do anything. But that's really not true. Change is people. We are change. We are writing our future. We are writing the moment we live in today. So look for a way, if you're interested, to become engaged. And I believe we need many things at the same time. Because I was thinking about the Me Too movement, what you said, that it really, like, the movement didn't come from the ground. It's because the push on the system change was not big enough. Because we need people who are advocating and who are like a face to a change or a movement. And then we need people in the nitty-gritty details working to propose new bills or something else. So we need many things at the same time. And that's tough, but we can do this. I think it was really interesting how you described it as not a backlash, but we're actually like winning, and that's why they're so mad. Like, I think that's really true, because women are doing great. If you look at, especially in the Netherlands, women are better educated than men. They are entering the workforce. They are doing so many good things. And I think it makes people a bit scared. Like, okay, the norms of the world are changing. What is our place? And we shouldn't be scared of this.
Amen to that. Lauren, how do you see this? How can you, me, us, everyone that's maybe listening, how can we make change happen in all these different ways?
I don't know what to add to those two powerful speeches that had just been made. I was like amazed by everything you said, and thank you so much for sharing these important thoughts with us. I really agree with the IRL element. I think it's so important to see each other in our faces and, you know, be able to touch our bodies and breathe the same air at some point. And I think it's really not a hasard. I don't know how to say. It's no casualty that like the big bosses of social media are on the side of tyrants, and they're really trying to separate us from each other, and that's when we lose our power. And I know, like, you know, I hate noise. It's really hard for me to go out of my house. I'd rather be reading a book with my dog really all day and maybe all my life. But I always push myself to come to events and conferences, and I'm so happy I took this train to Amsterdam and I'm meeting you today and I'm having this conversation with you, because I go back to France with in my heart the belief that there are many of us. There are many of us. And in a way, when I see the title Feminists Against the Tyrants, it feels like we are this tiny percentage of the population. The feminists were so radical. And the tyrants, they're so powerful, they're so rich, they're billionaire. How can we fight? It's like David and Goliath. But then I'm here and we're like, hey, there's many of us. And actually there's only a handful of them. So maybe there's enough of us to fight them. So that's why I think it's worth, keeping going, like going out and meeting and protesting. And we have this culture of protesting in France, that's true. Every time there is a reason to go on the street with a pancarte, we do it. But also these last years, there has been a lot of police repression, and it has been really, really hard. And also, I think it's not a casualty that it's becoming like so hard to. We're more and more scared to go protest in the street.
Not everyone is privileged to be able to protest.
Yeah,
because for some people it's much easier to protest. So I definitely recognize this.
Exactly, and I really agree with everything you said about the fact, like, I'm a 45-year-old white woman, and if I don't do it, who's gonna do it? I should stand up for queer people, for people of color, for all the people who have more risk at doing this. And I think it's really my responsibility and our collective responsibility also to protect and to speak up for people who are not heard, but not in their place. Yes, and exactly, also be able to hand them the microphone and let their voices be heard. But I don't know, I keep on being really optimistic. I also think we should be very careful with, the way we see the world, because we have a very occidental point of view on the world, and there are also places, for example, I know in India recently, women just won the right to abort, and there are many countries where they're like right now making laws that are feminist, that are moving the good way. There are countries where they're suppressing gender from the and we should also understand that our point of view is a very, very tiny one, and we should not interpret the way the world is going from only our mediatic point of view. I think some people are really interested, as you said, in us to be really scared and to be despaired and to be like, okay, just c'est foutu les gars, on arrête. No, I think it's not. I think we're not doomed at all, and we can still win.
I think maybe it's a good point to go to lessons that maybe we can learn from other places. I talked to you earlier, Alina, about lessons we could learn from South America when it goes about the abortion movement. It has been very successful over there. What made them so successful at incorporating abortion laws over there?
So in South and Middle America, there was a very strong movement, like the Green Tide movement. It was based on solidarity, because that was very important. And I think, from my point of view, when I analyzed the movement, I think it was the connection to stories, because when we talk about change and how, what I hear sometimes that people are saying things like, educate yourself, just be better, educate yourself. I always think that's very interesting, because then I start thinking like, okay, but how can we educate, and how can people also do something when someone tells them just educate yourself? I think what's very powerful is stories and connection. And that was really, that they did really well in the movement there. And also what really helped was that they had a symbol, like literally the green scarf. In the Netherlands, we had a very big protest. It was not a protest. I think it was like a statement, the red line for Gaza. what made it very powerful, I think, why many people felt safe to go there, because when change is happening, you have different types of people, right? You have people at the front, radical, they're not afraid. Then you have people who are more afraid to speak out or to do something. But we need everyone in change. I think what made that movement for that purpose powerful was that it was very easy, just wear something red. So I think that's a cool lesson we can also learn. My Voice, My Choice, I think also does that very well. There is just something very clear. My voice, my choice, always the same slogans. So I think that's very important. And still curious to hear what you felt about like the abortion law in France, whether that was successful or not. I'm also thinking about like the marriage equality movements. Those were also very big. And even Obama was not very enthusiastic about it in the beginning. But then he was. Maybe you know more about this.
Yeah. Oh, this is so fascinating because my brain races because yes, every time there is a new step towards equality, and for example, here in the Netherlands, we have the marriages open to both same-sex couples and opposite sex couples, and I know in France it also is like that. But then in the Netherlands, there was a research that people are in favor of same-sex marriage, but they rather not have same-sex couples kiss in the street or hold hands. So there are so many layers. And also I think also in Paris, it's not very safe for two girls or two guys to kiss each other at all. It's safe to marry, but it's not safe to show love. And therefore this movement needs a constant investment in solidarity. We need to remind each other constantly, because as soon as you go to sleep, it's gone. And this is what I like about, so how to give critique. Larissa's question as well. So how do we do this? How do we get together? The question then within philosophy is how to give critique, how to be heard the way intended. Following Gayatri Spivak, who says like the subaltern can speak, but is not heard the way intended, because they do not speak the language of the oppressor. How to gain symbolic access to the public opinion. Now, I work a lot with the transgender and intersex community. And the intersex community is such an important example because it's been a movement and a community since the late 1990s. Also with the emergence of internet, they started to find each other. These are people who are born with sex traits that are not completely male or female and are silenced, maybe not in France, because you have the famous diary of Herculine Barbin that Michel Foucault reprinted, but then...
yeah, but no.
not really well known. But this movement, what is so fascinating is that intersex occurs 1 in 200. Trans people occur, or transgender gender euphoria, queer gender euphoria appears much less. But this intersex movement has been silenced over and over again, first by the medical establishment, now by the anti-gender movement. And you see also that in the United States, where there's anti-gender laws and anti-gender laws throughout Europe, there's constantly made exceptions for intersex children. So trans adults seeking care for gender-affirming operations will not get it, but intersex children, without their permission, will be forced to gender-affirmative care. So how to deal with this? And I've been working with the intersex movement for 25 years. We made some small changes, but now we have the Pride coming. The
Amsterdam Pride.
Amsterdam Pride, which is this queer party for 2 weeks when everybody goes in the street. And the best is the Canal Pride, when everybody's on the boat being cheered on through the canals. It's huge. There is an intersex boat. We can't fill it. And it's so difficult for people to become solidary with the intersex movement. And it's so much easier because the transgender movement is so much more visible. So how to give critique? So critique is not fault finding. It's not saying, hey, this is wrong. You should side up more with the intersex community. You should make sure they are safe to come out of the closet. You should be sure they're safe to tell their stories, because they are not safe to tell stories at all yet. But fault finding doesn't go anywhere. It's just pointing out a mistake, and then people be like, oh, yeah, you're right, and then everybody moves on. So giving critique is a constant struggle, is a constant also going into the streets. But also, I love what you said, it's a constant coming from everywhere. So not just in the streets, but also as a lawyer working with law, and as a writer and a journalist, and as a philosopher, and as a program maker in the Balie for public opinion. But also here, I know you in the public also have your own professions in which you can make these small changes, critique is a practice. It's something you have to do every day. And I think
it's so funny because I was thinking this for the last 10 minutes, and exactly that's the point you reach, and I'm so happy. It's so nice to be talking with you, girls. But when I go, for example, sign my book in some regions in France, and I meet women who are like, school teachers, or they're engineers in a computer company, or they are agriculture, and like they work on a farm, and they're like, thank you so much for what you're doing. Your book is so important. I'm like, what do you do? I teach kids at school. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. And this year they only read women book. I was like, that's huge. How many students do you have? So this year, like 35 kids have studied women book, and they're 8. And this is going to probably change their vision of the world. And it's so impactful. What do you do? I'm an engineer. And you know what I did? I wrote all the programs of my computer company with both male and female, because we have this in French. We have to do something to make the female appear. I don't know how it's in Dutch, but and she did it without asking, and she's probably changed the vision of the world for every single people in her company. Or this woman who works on a farm who decided to cut off some pesticide that was killing bees, and she really changed the region for good. And I think there are so many micro changes, and when I'm optimistic, I'm like, you cannot tell what's going on, and how the world has spread, and how nothing is not going to go backwards. I'm pretty sure it's not going to go backwards. It's actually I think it's really impossible to erase from the people's mind what they've understood the last year. And yeah, there is very visible change, laws and big protests, and we need this to inspire and to spread the world. But there is so many micro changes every minute, every second, that this is it's a huge force against tyranny.
Can I ask, it's a question I think to my panelists and the audience, like, because you mentioned critique, and in the Netherlands, we had the Feminist March. I think maybe in France you have a type of women's march, or march maybe as well. And what happened in the Netherlands is we renamed it from Women's March to Feminist March to be more inclusive and intersectional. And every year there is critique on who gets to be on stage, and what stories are allowed to be heard, and who gets place, etc. So also this year, then you have the op-eds in the newspapers and critiquing the feminism. I'm just very curious. I don't have the answer. I have my own thoughts about this, but I'm just so curious to see also what you think. Like, how do we unite?
Maybe you can answer first, and then we'll go to the audience, because I'm curious as well. Like, maybe, there's so many messages going on also at the Feminist March, and then some people at the march say, oh, I don't agree with this, but I do agree with this, and then there's a lot of division inside us, and we don't unite. Yeah,
and who's a good feminist and who's not?
I think there is this question is at the center of every. There are many books coming out right now in France about this question. About actually the question almost is how to make justice in the activist movement. What do you do with people you disagree with? What do you do with people there is a conflict with? And also being a feminist against the tyrants is so fucking tiring. You get, into some situation of harassment and, being attacked by your own group. And I actually don't know a single feminist who hasn't lived this at some point, because you're never good enough. You're never, you're forgetting something, you said something wrong, you were there when you should have shut up, you didn't speak when you should have spoken. It's really complicated, and there is really this issue about, how do we unite, how do we, support each other, how do we not hurt each other, and many books are coming out right now about this subject, and restorative justice and communication, and all these tools that are being used in some community already to prevent us from splitting up and to work with our different point of views with complexity and nuance and the possibility of reparation is, I think it's becoming I don't think the solution is already found, but I think it's really a conversation that is going on, and it's the next big chapter we have to work on.
Margriet?
Yes.
Well, I first.
Feminist against the Tyrants, and it stopped the re-election of the tyrant, the actual tyrant in the United States. He didn't win the other election.
Wait, I might be, if I'm giving my.
But if you're referring to the Women's March in the U.S. in 2017.
Also
yeah,
here.
But the minute after the march was finished, it split. It was very complicated. One of the main organizer of the Women's March in the U.S. was accused of being pro-Islamist. Well, there has been like some crazy political shit, and it split. It didn't last. So it was like they managed to defeat kind of the tyrant, but it cost the mental health of thousands of women, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, so I keep repeating, it's giving critique is a practice. It's an ongoing practice, and you have to come back to the square constantly to demonstrate. And here's my problem with demonstrations, and my when I feel defeated, is I keep thinking about demonstration in Hong Kong, which were the biggest in history, millions and millions of people in the street, and we all know what happened. Nothing. Yeah, so it's so difficult to witness that. It's defeating to know that people from Hong Kong wanted to keep a democracy, and now they're part of the Chinese regime, and so this can happen. So, but then demonstrating is one way of showing how many you are, but still a few people can still oppress many others. So how do we do that? And I always turn to feminism and feminist philosophers and feminist thoughts, just like Lauren and everybody here, is because there is always some kind of radical rethinking the world, language, how we use language, how we think about the world, how we voice our concerns. And the other day, I saw this really interesting clip on Instagram. So that's also where feminism comes from. And it was somebody who was questioning the way we talk about teenage pregnancies. So it's in the news, it says like this year 100 teenage girls got pregnant. And it's never this year 100 teenage boys impregnated their girlfriends while having fun and experimenting and making a tiny little mistake of not using a condom. So it's the burden is always somewhere. So how can we radically rethink the way we see and know and define the world around us, and therefore yes. And another step. So this is how I turn. So to me, philosophy is giving hope. Another thing that always gives me hope is the radical rethinking of species. So we live together with animals, with our dogs. Yeah, I have cats at home that are my family. And my partner and I, the first thing we wake up is not how are you? It's like, where are the cats? How are the cats? Did you feed the cats? Are they outside? Are they inside? Where are the cats? So how we can radically rethink our world with the species around us, including bees as a companion species that we have to live with. And I think these ways of radical rethinking are important next to demonstrating and next to speaking up to to face tyrants. But I feel defeated, yes, also, yeah.
Like, don't see the world. It's we have to understand that when we use a word that tyrants also use, we make it stronger. So we shouldn't do that. We should just make new words. I really like what you said, because that's a big part of the work we do in abortion care. Is in the Netherlands, because abortion is in the criminal code, each year the inspection produces a report with the statistics on how many abortions were done this year. And we are so used to this. So like every year at the same time we get, I can line up all the journalists, you know, because everyone wants to write a piece about this. And I'm always thinking, I'm also telling journalists this as well, like, but why are we talking about how many abortions were performed? It's because it's in the criminal code. It says nothing about impacted lives. Maybe these women are very happy that they can just continue with their lives. And about the men, so why are we not talking about the men? It's always women fail to use contraceptives, and that's why they go to the abortion clinic. We had a study in the Netherlands done on this, that they found out how many women made use of contraceptive care when they went to the abortion clinic. First I thought, why do we need research? Because it's quite clear when they are at the abortion clinic that something went wrong with the contraception. But then it's put in the media as women are not taking responsibility. You know, panels were filled with male doctors talking about this, and no one once said, but what about the men? No one said that. So we really should dare to use other words. I really agree with this. And we think about this every day, how we can do this. We are also experimenting with not using the word abortion anymore, but just terminating a pregnancy or just care for people that don't want to be pregnant. But we need to see what sticks. So we are experimenting with this live, but it's a thought process. You have to do it together, and everyone has different thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think it's really important to question all the time, and I really loved the way that was so butlery of you to say, like, why choose between dystopia and utopia? Why be so binary? And it's incredible, because we are always binary. We're always like, it's really hard for us to get out of this idea that there is good and bad, but there is so much in between. And in continuation to what you just shared, I think it's interesting to know that the care ethics that was thought by an American psychologist called Carol Gilligan came up from studies she made from women who got abortion for the first time in the 70s in the US. And there was this thing in the media going on, like you had two types of women. The women who like felt horrible because they had to have an abortion, it was a drama in their life, and the women who were so happy to get rid of this horrible like baby perspective. And she interviewed hundreds of women, and she realized like for all of them, it was something in between. They were neither super happy or super sad. They were happy on some aspects, hesitating on others. It was complicated and it's always a complex decision that has, yeah, but my husband, my parents, the child I already have, my work, my health, my house, and it's never binary. And that's how she came up with this idea that there is a moral that is much more spirally and complex. And maybe she made it more feminine, not in a biological way, but in a more cultural way, because the way women are raised make them always like have more than two types of thinking in their mind. And so, yeah, I think it might sound a bit tiring, this program, but it's also very exciting for our brains and our hearts, to always try and take a step aside and try and see things from a very different point of view.
With those words, I'd like to go to the audience, because I think I saw already a few hands. I'm going to you with the microphone. Excuse me, I'm gonna walk. Yes, I'll hold the mic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. My question is related to also the op-ed against the feminist march, and what you said, Lauren, that it's all in the end about money. And what the op-ed said was that by being intersectional and international, the feminist march did not speak to the working class of women in the Netherlands. And when we are talking about tyrants, they also target the working class. They say that left movements are not speaking the language of the working class. So I'm curious, how do you incorporate this class element in our intersectional feminism?
Who wants to answer that?
I don't know.
Who do you? I think everyone. Yeah.
Okay, you can start.
Well, it's. I don't know. I think it's a great question. I mean, like, I will answer your question by your question. How do we not forget class? I think when we talk about intersectionalism, we often forget class. Maybe the reason is historical, because, you know, like the Marxist movement has forgotten women so badly that now women forget Marxism really easily. Maybe it's a kind of revenge, but it's not good. And you're totally right, the fact that tyrants try and speak with their feelings and their empathy. That's what we were saying last night at the European literature nights, that, yeah, tyrants use empathy and pretend to empathize with the poorest people in the society. And it's very, very dangerous. And it's really important to not forget class. I totally agree with you. Mm.
I didn't follow the classism argument really well. Did I understand? Because what I heard was that Palestinian woman was speaking up on stage, but in English, and the criticism was that she was speaking in English on a Dutch feminist march.
Yeah, but also, I think she also argued therefore.
Sorry, no one can hear you in line, so I'm gonna give you the mic again.
Yeah, I think she also argued that therefore it doesn't resonate with the Dutch working class group, which we should also reach out to, because in the upcoming election, for instance, there are also a big group that are not part of this leftist bubble, and then, you know, we should get more women into our movement. But by being intersectional and international, this author thought that we are not, we're not accessible, maybe also for.
So it's such a good point. So there was the idea that there is just one sort of feminism that speaks to all, and this is not international, and you don't speak English. But we already hear how we find each other here is because we use English as a lingua franca. None of us speaks it really well, or as a native. Well, you speak it really well, but
no. You speak so much better than me.
But then it's not our native. It's not our mother tongue. It's we have to look for words or think about words while we speak. It's a lingua franca, and that's how we meet each other in the middle. And I think that's amazing. And so, how can you critique a Palestinian woman for? Because I got an email from a woman saying, like, yeah, so let's hope next year she'll speak in Dutch. So, but why do you have to speak Dutch to be heard by Dutch feminists? And you agree with me, eh? Oh yeah. So no, that was to me and a lot of feminists very offensive critique. And the critique is like really difficult to come back to. Like, so how can you, if somebody says like, you're making me a victim by speaking English, and what can we say other than, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to, but we wanted to hear a voice from Palestine. And therefore, can't we just meet each other in the middle? Can't we ask somebody to translate for us? And translation is so important in this intersectional world and international solidarity. And then also the idea that women of a certain class, and I don't know how, or a certain socio-economic position don't speak English well, is also a ridiculous assumption. Yeah, so there's so many problems. Thank you for pointing this out. There were a lot of problems there, I think, yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Please raise your hand. I see one here.
Should I? Oh, okay, thanks. Sorry, when I get Anxious?
Take your time. Take your time.
So over time and over life, there are a lot of feminist slaps that you get as a woman, right? And I've gotten all those slaps, as a teenager, and then growing, entering the employment market, or having a baby, and all of those steps have made me at least more radicalized and more angry. And
wait for menopause.
I can't wait. And I'm even joining the UvA next year for gender studies. But at the same time, with this anger, I'm also isolating myself from what I would say the more mainstream world or the normal people. And how do we keep ourselves, first of all, sane, healthy, and secondly, not completely isolated, because I want to change people around me, but I'm also losing a lot of people.
Maybe I can say something about this because I do the work next to my normal job. I work at a big bank, so a very different environment. So I'm constantly in both worlds. Like I've met wonderful people in the NGO activism world, and I have people that I work with that are also very amazing, talented, care a lot about the world, but are not doing anything with feminism. So I think sometimes that it's just about connecting with people. That's what I learned the past years doing this work, and also take time for yourself, do something fun. That's really important, because it's something. This is for the long haul, and don't burn out all your energy. Just take your time, do what you can do, and always make sure to see the other person and try to connect. And happy to tell you more about how I do that and stay sane. And I think my friends actually think it's quite cool what I do, even if they never thought about abortion care, that it was important. But because I'm doing this, they are also learning things. And people don't always agree with me. My friends don't always agree. But then we have wonderful discussions, and they feel safe with me because I'm not criticizing them. Like, you're not doing enough, or you should also do this, or but I'm not the kind of person who does that. That helps me. And I just wanted to quickly touch upon your point about the intersectionalism and the critique, because I think it's very interesting if you say that the left should do more with the working class, and then say that the feminist march was too intersectional, because I think what a problem is with our feminism in the Netherlands is that we care so much about other people, but sometimes we don't see how marginalized groups are experiencing sexism even in a worse way. So it's quite weird, right, to say that we should care more about the working class and then say that you don't need intersectionality. Because, for example, a very small example, in the Netherlands, you have abortion clinics, but you have to travel to those abortion clinics, and not everyone can travel and can because we have some islands in the Netherlands in the north. You have to travel quite far to get the care, and we tend to overlook this if we don't think about this intersection in an intersectional way. In our studies we did at the IUD pain, we saw we have to study this more, so don't take this as like the new truth, but we saw some data that people with lower incomes experience more pain. And this is where intersectionality comes in. If we don't look through that lens, we can also not help the people.
Thank you so much. I saw another question here. You had a question?
Yeah, no, it was also about unity and how do we unite, like the question you had a while ago. And I don't know, for me, every time I hear that feminists are not united, or that there is different movements, for me, it's like the question that the men ask me all the time, like, oh, you're a feminist, but what type of feminist are you? Are you a radical feminist? Are you an extremist? Because I'm okay with feminists, but not the extreme ones. And I'm always so annoyed with this question, because I'm a feminist, that point. Like, doesn't matter if I'm this or that, we have sorority, right? We have the unity is in this sorority, in this empathy that we have for each other, in this care that we know how to give and that we can give to each other as sisters of course, we cannot care or empathize with everybody all the time, and I think it's fine to like be aware of those things, but like just act where we are and how we can, and unite with like the women that we have around us, and then a little bit further, and then a little bit further if we can, and the men as well who want to join the movement, of course. So as a French feminist, for example, and I'm really trying in the Netherlands to create something, like we have a feminist book club, French. But then my next question now is like, okay, in my surrounding, I created a conversation, but then how do I get further? How do I meet the Dutch women on this level? Until now, I'm happy that we have an English talk today, but until now, I really wanted to reach to other feminists, but it was in Dutch, and I don't speak Dutch. So, you know, like it's like, again, this question about intersectionality, like, like the unity comes from, everybody joining the conversation,
I don't know, I want to question your need to go further and to do more and to be better and to perform more. Do you have to do more? We all, I think it also goes with the question of anger. Like, this word sucks. What can I do? How do I clean it? How do I make it better? Because we always feel so much responsibility. And I know for sure that this question of anger comes all the time. And also this question of how do I do more comes all the time. And it's like so womanly of us to have such question. Do we imagine a man be like, yeah, I'm really angry at people. How do I get less angry? No. Or do you will never hear a man be like, how do I do better? You'll hear a man say, I do a lot. I'm really good. Really, and let's be more like men, you know? Like be more like, hey, what I do is really cool. Like, wow, you created a feminist book club? That's huge. Who does that? I'm sure you have a life. I'm sure you take care of other people around you. I'm sure you have a health, a body, a work. And you're doing this on top of that? That's amazing. Congratulations. Take care of yourself. Do some sports and get a dog or a cat. I don't know. That would be a lot because that would maintain you in good mental health. And, you know, and I also know that anger kind of fades away all the time. I'm pretty sure. Like I've been into feminism for the last 10 years. And I know that there is this peak. You might be at the peak. It's horrible because you don't know what to do with all this rage you have inside. But at some point, you cannot spend your life being angry. Like there is some regulation that goes on in your brain, in your body, and you end up like picking the people you're going to talk, you know, about feminism with. You know, you're going to make the rational decision to not discuss feminism with this horrible guy at the dinner table and just like, you know, sip your glass and go home and watch a movie because you're tired. And that calms down and you find your way to make the world better. And sometimes it doesn't have to be this, I don't know, this visible or this big. I don't know if you agree with me, girls, but I think, yeah.
Yeah, I always turn to feminist manifestos. They're amazing. You have the Scam Manifesto. It starts with Valeria Solanas, or the latest by Paul Preciado, Disforo Mundi. I loved his Can the Monster Speak manifesto. Simone von Saarloos wrote a beautiful manifesto on ageism, how both young and older people face discrimination based on their age, and how this is also part of intersectional thinking. I loved it. This morning to prepare, actually, I was like, what manifesto I'm going to read? And I read Donna Haraway's Species Manifesto on how we live side by side with dogs and how our relationships with dogs can make us see this world differently. And but that's how my brain works. So that is, so everybody has to find their own way to cope with adversaries and anger. And I'm constantly thinking about this anger because there is this really funny thing is like that anger is this emotion that men rebranded as a non-emotion, and therefore women are the emotional type, because men are angry all the time, and then they start a war. But when you're angry, you're like, oh my God, why am I so angry? It's like rebranded as a non-emotion and just go on. Like anger is okay and anger is productive, just as fear is and being defeated is and joy is. And I love now how in the queer movement people are looking for queer joy. So how to... last year, Berdan Kaplan, a wonderful student of mine, wrote his master thesis on his fascination for how in the queer community people are discriminated against, isolated, and how they still find joy. And this looking for joy could be a very feminist activity. And so shout out to Berdan for his beautiful thesis. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
I think I would love to talk to you, all of you, also with the audience, for many hours, but I'm afraid I have to let you go. I want to thank my speakers first, Lauren Bastide, Alina Chak, and Margriet van Hees. Please give them applause. I want to thank all of you for being here. If you have any other questions, I'm still going to be in the building. You can ask me a lot of questions. I think you will hang around as well. Please go to the bar for the third round. There are also other programs for the forum that are still going on today. You can also visit them. Thank you so much for being here and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larissa.